Everything shifted in a single heartbeat. The arena lights didn't fade. They collapsed, as if someone pulled the world's plug and left the entire stadium gasping in darkness. The crowd fell silent, not the excited silence of anticipation, but the kind that creeps into a room when every person feels something is terribly wrong. The match in the ring froze mid-motion, and then it happened. A figure appeared at the top of the ramp, framed by a single spotlight that flickered like a dying candle. No one recognized her. No theme music, no Titantron, no introduction. Just a woman walking through the doorway like she had been waiting for this moment her entire life. At first, the audience thought it was part of the show. WWE is known for surprises. But this wasn't the kind of surprise that feels planned. This was the kind that makes your chest tighten before your mind catches up. The referees stepped back. Security hesitated. Even the superstars exchanged uncertain looks, unsure whether they should confront her or protect her. She wasn't rushing, wasn't panicked. She walked slowly, deliberately, every step echoing across the silent arena. And in a place built to be loud, silence becomes its own kind of pressure. Kids clutched signs tighter, adults leaned forward in their seats. Thousands of cameras rose, hands shaking as if holding onto the only proof that this moment was real. Nobody knew her face, nobody knew her story. Yet somehow, everyone felt the weight of her arrival. It was as if she'd stepped out of a forgotten chapter of WWE's history, one that nobody remembered reading, but everyone suddenly feared was true. The woman stopped halfway down the ramp. She looked around the arena, not with confusion, not with fear, but with a strange calmness. Her eyes didn't search for someone, they announced something. Something unfinished, something personal. A faint murmur spread through the crowd, whispers mixing with gasps. Who was she? Why tonight? Why this show? People online were typing furiously, trying to connect her to legends, past storylines, forgotten rivalries. But there was nothing. Her presence didn't match any name the internet could pull out of the archives. Then she slowly lifted her hand, not dramatically, not theatrically. Just a simple gesture, as if acknowledging a truth too heavy for words. And in that moment, you could feel the energy shift again. Not fear, something softer, something emotional. Something that made even the toughest fans swallow hard. She wasn't here to attack anyone. She wasn't here to cut a promo. She wasn't here to shock for the sake of shock. She was here because something had brought her to this exact place, on this exact night, and she could no longer stay hidden. Nobody expected her, and yet, somehow, it felt like she had been meant to walk through those doors all along. A hush swept through backstage before anyone even saw her on the monitors. It started as a ripple, one confused voice, then another, then a chain reaction of uncertainty. Producers leaned forward in their seats. Agents pressed headsets tighter to their ears, trying to get answers from a control room that suddenly had none. Wrestlers waiting for their segments turned away from their warm-ups, drawn by the same unseen gravity that had pulled the entire arena to a standstill. Something was wrong, or maybe something long buried was resurfacing. The moment her image hit the live backstage monitors, everything stalled. The hallway chatter died instantly. A few wrestlers took involuntary steps backward, as if distance could shield them from the emotion swelling in their chests. Others stood frozen, eyes fixed, trying to understand the familiarity in her posture, her expression, her presence. Not because they recognized her face, but because they recognized a feeling behind it, a kind of heartbreak that speaks louder than any storyline ever written. No one wanted to be the first to ask the question echoing in everyone's mind. Was she connected to someone here? The head of security rushed to the gorilla position, demanding clarity, demanding identification. But the truth was painfully simple. No one had ever seen her before. She wasn't on a list. She wasn't scheduled. She wasn't credentialed, and yet she moved with the confidence of someone who wasn't trespassing, but returning. One producer whispered, "She looks like she belongs here," and that was the problem. Her presence stirred something old, something emotional, something WWE isn't used to facing live in front of thousands of fans, legacy, loss, and finished stories that were never meant to reach the spotlight again. A superstar with a long career, one known for never showing vulnerability, felt his stomach drop. Not because he knew her, but because the look in her eyes reminded him of someone he once failed, someone he never got the chance to apologize to. And just like that, the moment became personal for people who didn't even know her name. In the control room, the director scrambled for a decision. Do we cut the feed? Someone asked, but cut to what? Everything was already centered on her. To turn away now would feel like running from a truth the entire world was about to witness. And WWE doesn't run from drama, it amplifies it. Meanwhile, backstage staff began whispering theories. A long-lost sibling of a superstar, a former trainee who disappeared before debuting. A member of a family whose legacy carried both glory and tragedy. But every theory created more questions. The unknown woman didn't speak. She didn't rush. Her silence became the loudest thing happening. It was as if she held a story behind her eyes that the entire roster suddenly felt responsible for hearing, yet terrified to uncover. Whoever she was, someone in WWE was connected to her. And backstage, hearts were racing because they feared they knew who. The audience's emotions fractured into 1,000 directions. Some fans stood, hands shaking as they recorded, their screens lit with disbelief. Others remained seated, clutching the edges of their chairs like they were bracing for a storm. A few cried without understanding why. Something about her presence triggered memories, hopes, fears, and losses of their own. WWE fans are used to excitement, shock, betrayal. But this moment felt different. This wasn't scripted chaos. This was real emotion walking into a world built on spectacle. Children looked up at their parents for answers, but the adults had none. Even longtime fans who pride themselves on recognizing every debut, every tease, every returning legend felt helpless. The arena buzzed with the kind of confusion that connects strangers, turning the crowd into one shared heartbeat. People exchanged theories with the fans beside them, creating spontaneous little communities of uncertainty. Some guessed she was a lost daughter of a Hall of Famer. Others claimed she had been spotted at indie shows years ago. A few insisted she resembled someone from an old WWE documentary, though no one could agree on which one. Every emotion became amplified because nobody knew which direction this moment would turn. Was she here with love? With anger? With a message? With a warning? Fans weren't reacting to a storyline, they were reacting to the unknown, and nothing is more powerful than that. The match that had been happening before her arrival had become a forgotten memory. The superstars in the ring slowly lowered their stances, their adrenaline fading into confusion. The referee kept glancing between them and the ramp, unsure whether to call for a bell, evacuate, or simply wait. We fans could sense the tension. Their instincts told them this wasn't about competition anymore. It was about something human, something private becoming painfully public. As she reached the edge of the ring, the entire crowd leaned forward as one. Her hand gently touched the apron, and for a moment, the building held its breath. Not because she seemed threatening, but because she seemed heartbroken. And heartbreak in a wrestling ring feels heavier than any steel chair. People online began typing frantic comments. Why does she look like she's carrying a story she never wanted to tell? She's scared but determined. Something bad must have happened. And then a chant began, soft at first, awkward even. But it grew, not a wrestler's name. Not a catchphrase, something different. Let her talk. The chant rolled through the arena like a tide, catching her off guard. Her expression shifted, almost breaking, not in fear, but in relief. As if she didn't expect anyone to want to hear her at all. Fans weren't just watching anymore, they were supporting her, protecting her, holding space for her to reveal something she had carried alone for far too long. Whatever her story was, the WWE Universe was now a part of it. Backstage, the emotional impact deepened. Wrestlers who were hardened by years of storylines, injuries, betrayals, and victories suddenly felt something they rarely felt on show nights: vulnerability. This mystery woman didn't unleash chaos, she unleashed reflection. People who hadn't spoken to their families in years suddenly wondered if they should call. Those who had lost loved ones felt old wounds sting. And superstars who carried guilt, whether deserved or imagined, felt it surface unexpectedly. One veteran performer leaned against a crate, eyes fixed on the monitor, whispering, "She reminds me of someone I let down." Another shook his head and muttered, "If she's here for me." "I'm not ready." Even the most confident, charismatic entertainers looked strangely small in that moment. The head writer approached the gorilla position, unsure whether he should intervene. "Do we control this?" he asked, but no one answered. Because trying to control something so raw felt wrong. This wasn't a storyline, it was life bleeding into the show, and life doesn't wait for scripts. In the family area, the scene was even more emotional. Partners, children, and relatives of WWE talent watched with mixed unease and compassion. A few wives exchanged whispers, wondering if she had a connection to their husbands' pasts. Some children felt the tension without understanding it. One little girl clutching a championship replica belt asked her mother, "Is she sad?" And the mother, who knew all too well how complicated the wrestling world could be, nodded gently. Even staff members who never appear on camera felt something shift in them. A production assistant whispered that the woman walked like she'd been in arenas before, but carried herself like she wasn't sure she deserved to be there. Someone else noted that she didn't look angry. She looked determined but exhausted, like she had reached the end of a long road and didn't know what would happen next. The media team scrambled in confusion. Headlines were already forming before anyone knew the truth. An identified woman interrupts WWE event. Possible relative of superstar enters arena. The emotional moment shakes WWE to its core. Reporters wondered whether she was connected to a tragedy, a forgotten rivalry, or a family secret buried beneath years of storylines. But speculation only fueled the emotional panic. Even legends watching from home sent texts to producers asking, "Who is she?" A few feared she was connected to their own past, worried an old decision might be resurfacing. Others felt a strange pull toward her because they recognized the posture of someone who had been wronged but refused to stay silent. Every corner of WWE felt the ripple. Every person, whether in the ring, backstage, or watching from afar, felt the weight of her presence. She wasn't here to attack anyone. She wasn't here for fame. She was here because someone in WWE needed to face something they had been avoiding for years, and she wasn't leaving until they did. She finally stepped into the ring, not with grand entrance energy, not with the confidence of a wrestler, but with the quiet strength of someone who had reached the end of her silence. The crowd didn't boo, didn't cheer mindlessly. They watched with a reverence usually reserved for moments that change careers, not create them. She stood in the center, looking around as if trying to decide whether she was worthy of speaking it aloud. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. The audience gasped. Papers in wrestling rings are never simple. They hold confessions, challenges, farewells, truths, but she didn't unfold it. She simply stared at it, trembling slightly, as if the story written on that page had haunted her for too long. A familiar theme played. A superstar walked onto the ramp, one of WWE's most respected, most beloved, someone known for resilience, honesty, and a complicated personal history. When he saw her, his face changed instantly, not shock, not anger, recognition, the kind that hits like a punch to the chest. The crowd reacted in waves, first confusion, then disbelief, then emotional eruption. He didn't run. He walked toward the ring slowly, cautiously, like approaching someone he had once promised to protect but failed. When he stepped into the ring, their eyes met, and the arena went silent again. He whispered something to her, too soft for cameras to catch. Her shoulders shook, She handed him the folded paper. He took it with hands that trembled more than his most intense matches ever had. When he opened it, his expression shattered, not anger, guilt, heartache, regret. He mouthed two words, "I'm sorry." Fans didn't know what the letter said. They didn't know if she was a sister, a childhood friend, someone connected to a past tragedy, or someone whose life he had touched long before he became a superstar. But they felt the weight of it. The way she looked at him wasn't with flame, it was with closure. And the way he looked at her wasn't with fear, it was with acceptance. The crowd began to clap softly at first, then louder, building into a unified sound of support. This wasn't a rivalry. This wasn't a return. This wasn't chaos. It was a reunion. When she finally left the ring, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The superstar watched her all the way up the ramp, his eyes heavier but relieved. Whatever story they shared, whatever hurt lived between them, tonight had ended it. But the real twist didn't happen until later. Backstage, as the cameras cut, he folded the letter again and whispered, "I thought you were gone forever." The letter wasn't a threat. It wasn't a demand. It was a goodbye she never got to deliver years ago. A goodbye he was finally ready to hear. Sometimes the biggest moments in WWE aren't about titles or betrayals. Sometimes they're about the people we lost. And the people who unexpectedly return to remind us what truly matters.